I was teaching my grandson to fish when my daughter-in-law came storming down to the pond, yanked him by the wrist, and dragged him to her car like I was some stranger. She leaned close enough for me to smell her coffee breath and said, "After what you did, you will never see him again. What would you do if you were me? Before you decide I deserved it, read the whole thing and tell me if I went too far when I finally pushed back." My name is Nathaniel Brocklowski. I'm 71 years old, a widower, and I've spent most of my life building things that last: bridges, retaining walls, small commercial jobs, anything that needed steady hands and a steady mind. I have one son, Ethan, and one grandson, Caleb, who used to call me Grandpa Nate, like it was the safest word he knew. That pond on the edge of my land was our place, until Marissa decided it was her battlefield. The morning she took him, the water was glassy and still, the kind of early summer quiet that makes you believe nothing bad can reach you. Caleb stood beside me in his little rubber boots, gripping a cheap rod I'd bought specifically because it was light enough for his hands. He had that serious look kids get when they're trying to do an adult thing correctly. "Don't yank," I told him. "Let the bobber do the talking." He nodded like I'd handed him a secret. We'd been out there less than 15 minutes when I heard tires crunching gravel on my driveway. Fast. Too fast. A car door slammed hard enough to scare birds out of the reeds. Marissa's voice came next. Sharp. High. Performative. Like she wanted the woods to hear her. "Caleb! Get away from him! Now!" Caleb flinched. His eyes went wide the way they did when thunder hit too close. I stood and turned. Marissa came marching down the bank in a white blouse that looked too clean for a pond. Her hair was perfect. Her sunglasses big enough to hide an entire conscience. She wasn't alone either. Behind her, Ethan's car sat crooked near my gate, like it had been parked in a hurry. Ethan wasn't in it. "Marissa," I said, calm. "We're fishing. It's Saturday. Ethan knows." She didn't answer me. She looked at Caleb like he'd wandered into danger on his own. "Come here," she ordered, and held out her hand. Caleb looked at me first, not because he was disobeying her, because he was checking which world he was supposed to live in. I nodded at him. "It's okay, buddy. Go." He stepped toward her, and she grabbed his wrist like she was seizing property, not guiding him, seizing him. He made a small sound, the kind a child makes when something hurts but he's trying not to show it. "That's enough," I said, and my voice finally had teeth. "You're hurting him." She snapped her head toward me like a snake hearing movement. "You do not tell me what I'm doing," she hissed. "You don't get to play grandfather anymore." I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" She leaned in, close to my face, her nails bright, her smile cold. "After what you did," she said softly, like she was savoring it, "you will never see him again." Then she dragged Caleb up the bank. He stumbled twice trying to keep his boots from sliding in the mud. His rod fell. The line snagged a cattail. He looked back at me once, quick, terrified, as if he was trying to memorize my face before it disappeared. "Grandpa?" he whispered. Marissa yanked him harder. "Do not talk to him." And that was it. Gravel spit under her tires. The car disappeared. The pond went quiet again, but it wasn't the same quiet. It was the quiet after a door slams in a house you built. I stood there in the mud, holding a small tackle box like it was a useless gift, and I realized something with a clarity that made my stomach turn. She wasn't just angry, she was confident. That confidence is what frightened me most, because confident people don't threaten unless they think they already won. Ethan didn't call that day. He didn't text. He didn't send one of his stiff, half-hearted apologies. Nothing. That night, I drove to their house anyway. Not to yell, not to fight, just to see Caleb in a window. To make sure he was home, safe, eating dinner, still a real child and not a pawn in some adult war. The porch light was off, the curtains were drawn, and there was a new camera above the garage, angled toward the driveway like a watchful eye. I sat in my truck in the dark, hands on the steering wheel, and felt something I hadn't felt since I buried my wife. Grief that had nowhere to go. 2 days later, a process server walked up my front steps and handed me a stack of papers. Restraining order. Marissa's name at the top, my name underneath, written like a warning. I stood in my doorway and read accusations that made my mouth go dry. Harassment. Intimidation. Unstable behavior. And then the line that made the world tilt. Inappropriate conduct around a minor. I read it twice because my brain refused to let my eyes understand what they were seeing. I had never laid a hand on my grandson except to steady him, hug him, or lift him onto my shoulders when he was tired. I read it a third time, slower, and the truth landed like a hammer. Marissa didn't just want distance, she wanted a stain. Because distance can be challenged. A stain is forever. I called Ethan immediately. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. I drove to his job site in town, the one he managed for a contractor I'd helped him get hired with years ago. I found his truck. I found his foreman. But Ethan was gone. Family emergency, they said. He left early. I went home and sat at my kitchen table until the sky turned orange and then black again, and I started doing what I always do when something breaks. I traced the fracture. Marissa said, "After what you did." What had I done? Not what she was claiming now, not this filth. No, she meant the other thing, the thing Ethan begged me not to do. 3 weeks earlier, Ethan had come to my house late at night. His eyes were red. His jaw wouldn't stop working like he was chewing on pain. "She's been taking money," he said. I didn't speak at first. I waited. Because when a man finally says a sentence like that, he's been carrying it for a long time. Ethan swallowed. "Caleb's account, the one you set up, the one you're trustee on. She got the card info somehow. She says it's fine because it's for the family." I felt my spine go stiff. "How much?" Ethan looked away. "I don't know, a few thousand." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the folder I kept for that account. I'd put money aside since Caleb was born, not because I thought my son couldn't provide, but because I learned young that the world does not care who deserves help. You either have reserves or you get swallowed. I logged into the account. The screen showed withdrawals that weren't tuition, groceries, or anything that looked like a child's life. ATM pulls, late-night transactions, online payments that went to places with names that didn't belong in a family budget. And the worst part? They were labeled authorized because someone had used the trustee credentials. My credentials. I stared at Ethan. How did she get this? He shook his head. She said she found a document. In my drawer. She said you gave me copies. I had never given him copies. Ethan looked like a man drowning. "Dad, please, don't call anyone. She'll explode. She'll take Caleb. She keeps saying that if I cross her, she'll make sure I never see him again." There it was, the weapon. And like a fool, Ethan had been trying to negotiate with a person holding a blade to his child's throat. I told Ethan I wouldn't do anything without talking to him first. I said it because I wanted him to trust me. Then I broke that promise the next morning. I called the bank, not to accuse, not to scream, to lock the account down, to freeze any access that wasn't mine, to demand records. The woman on the phone was polite until I mentioned unauthorized trustee use. Then her tone changed. She asked careful questions. She suggested I come in. She used words like fraud department. That same afternoon, I called a friend of mine, Harold Pierce, a retired deputy who'd done private investigation work after his pension. I told him I needed facts, not rumors. Facts. And one more thing happened. I called Child Services. Not because I wanted to punish Marissa, because I was scared. Not of her anger, of what a person does when their grip slips. That was what I did. I locked the money down. I started asking questions. I made the first move. And Marissa responded by trying to destroy me. When you understand that, you understand the real battle. It wasn't about me seeing my grandson. It was about Marissa keeping control. Over Ethan, over Caleb, over money she didn't earn, over a narrative she could weaponize. And now she'd escalated it to something so vile that even defending myself felt like crawling through sewage. The restraining order meant I couldn't go near their house, couldn't go near Caleb's school, couldn't call Marissa, couldn't even ask about my grandson without risking violating a court order based on lies. I sat in my quiet kitchen and looked at the place setting across from me that I still hadn't moved since my wife died. Then I made a decision. If Marissa wanted war, she was going to get a kind of war she couldn't perform her way out of. Harold came over the next evening with a folder and a face that told me the contents weren't pleasant. "Your daughter-in-law," he said, "has a history." I opened the folder. Old arrest record, not a conviction, but an arrest for check fraud in another state when she was younger. Charges dropped after restitution. That meant someone paid and the system moved on. There were also civil filings. A landlord who claimed she skipped out on a lease. A collection company. A small claims judgment she'd ignored until it threatened wage garnishment. Then Harold put down photos. Marissa outside a store late at night, talking to a man with a shaved head and a cheap chain around his neck. The kind of man who carries impatience in his posture. "Who is that?" I asked. "Name's Blake Rourke," Harold said. "Felony record, burglary, possession, probation, and he's been around her more than once." My throat tightened. "Ethan knows?" Harold shook his head. "No. And your grandson's been in the car with her when this guy's nearby." I sat very still. "Anything else?" I asked. Harold hesitated. "There's a payment trail. Those late-night transactions. Some of them go to an online betting site. Others go to cash transfer apps that route to accounts with names you don't recognize." I looked at him. "Can we prove it's her?" "We can prove the account was accessed," Harold said. "We can prove where money went. Getting to 'she did it' means showing device use, IP addresses, surveillance, statements, something undeniable." I nodded slowly. "Then we get something undeniable," I said. For the next week, I lived like a man building a case against a storm. I didn't violate the order. I didn't drive by their house. I didn't call Marissa. I didn't even allow myself to sit in my truck and stare in the direction of Caleb's school. Instead, I gathered what I could legally gather. I printed bank logs. I got my own phone records. I pulled the security camera footage from my property reminder that Marissa had come to my pond, grabbed Caleb, and left. The audio caught her words. Clear as day. "After what you did, never see him again." It didn't prove innocence from her ugliest claim, but it painted a picture. Anger, hostility, control. Then Harold did what he does best. He watched from legal distances. Public spaces, parking lots, store entrances. He didn't harass. He documented. And what he documented made my blood run cold. Marissa's car at a gas station at 1:12 a.m. Caleb in the back seat curled under a blanket. Marissa talking to Blake beside the pump, laughing. Marissa at a cash-checking place that charged predatory fees, walking out with an envelope. Marissa outside a small house on the edge of town where people came and went fast, eyes darting, bodies tight. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon, Harold called me, and his voice was low. "Your grandson was left alone," he said. My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "Marissa parked behind a strip mall," Harold said. "She went inside a place for nearly 40 minutes. Caleb stayed in the car the whole time. No AC. Windows barely cracked. He was wiping his face with his sleeve. He looked like he'd been crying." I gripped my phone so hard my fingers ached. "Did you do anything?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "I called it in," Harold said. "As a welfare check. Not in your name." I closed my eyes. I pictured Caleb's small body in the back seat, waiting, trusting. Something inside me hardened. It wasn't hatred. It was resolve. Because at that point, Marissa wasn't a vindictive woman. She was a risk, and my grandson was a child. Ethan finally called me that night. His voice sounded like someone had wrung him out. "Dad," he said, "she says you're trying to ruin her." "I'm trying to protect Caleb," I answered. "She filed those papers because you froze the account," Ethan said, and I heard shame underneath it. "She told me you're controlling, that you're obsessed, that you—" He stopped. He couldn't say it. He couldn't put her accusation into the air. I did it for him. That I touched my own grandson. Silence. Then Ethan whispered, "She said if I don't stand with her, she'll say worse." I felt my stomach twist. "Ethan, listen to me. This is not about me and her. This is about your son. You need to wake up." He made a small sound, like pain. "She's all I have," he said. "No," I said. "Caleb is what you have, and you're about to lose him if you keep negotiating with a liar." Ethan's voice cracked. "What did you do, Dad? She keeps saying after what you did." "I froze the account," I said, "and I reported what I saw. That's what I did." Ethan inhaled sharply. "You called them?" "Yes," I said, "because I'm not watching a child get dragged through whatever this is." Ethan didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was smaller. "She says she'll take him out of state. She says she'll disappear." "That," I said, "is why we stop her now." I told Ethan everything Harold had found. I told him about Blake Rourke. I told him about Caleb left in the car. I told him about the payments. Ethan started breathing hard like he was trying not to panic. "I didn't know," he whispered. "You didn't want to know," I said softer, "because he was my son, and I didn't want to crush him. I just needed him to move." "I can't," he said suddenly. "Dad, I can't go against her. She'll bury me. She'll tell everyone. She'll—" "Ethan," I said, and my voice turned granite. "If you let her take your son and you do nothing, you will spend the rest of your life hating yourself, and you will deserve it." He sobbed once. A sharp, ugly sound. Then he said, "Tell me what to do." I didn't feel triumph. I felt sadness. Because a father should never have to instruct his grown son how to fight for his own child. "Come to my house tomorrow," I said. "Alone. And bring any documents you have. Anything she's made you sign. Anything she keeps in that drawer." He arrived the next day looking like a man 10 years older. We sat at my kitchen table while the late afternoon light slanted across the old wood. Ethan opened a folder and slid papers toward me. One of them was a copy of the trustee login details. My login details. Typed. On a sheet of paper. With my name at the top. And a signature at the bottom that looked like mine but wasn't mine. I stared at it, then at Ethan. "She told you I gave you this?" I asked. He nodded. My jaw tightened. "That's a forgery." Ethan's eyes went wide. "What?" "She forged my signature," I said, "and she used it to justify stealing from a child." Ethan's hands started shaking. "Oh my God." I reached across the table and took the paper. I didn't need a lab to tell it wasn't my signature. I'd signed checks and contracts for decades. I knew my own hand like I knew my own heartbeat. That paper was the kind of evidence that doesn't care how charming someone is. It just sits there and tells the truth. I looked at Harold, who had come over quietly and sat in the corner like a shadow. Harold nodded once. "That's what we needed," he said. And that was the moment I understood what Marissa's confidence had been built on. She thought Ethan would stay afraid. She thought I'd stay ashamed. She thought the accusation alone would be enough to silence me. But now I had something that could swing the whole weight of the system onto her shoulders. We moved carefully after that. No dramatic phone calls, no doorstep confrontations, no threats, just steps. Harold arranged for a certified document examiner to compare the signature to known samples of mine. We didn't need perfection. We needed credibility. I met with an attorney in the next county, a woman named Denise Halpern, who had the kind of calm voice that makes liars sweat. She didn't promise miracles. She asked for proof. So I gave her proof. Bank logs, Harold's photos, the forged paper, the security footage of Marissa ripping Caleb away while making threats. Denise sat back and said, "If we file for emergency custody, we'll need immediate risk." I nodded. A child left in a car at night, around a felon, and financial exploitation. Denise's eyes sharpened. "Yes," she said. "That qualifies." Ethan looked like he might vomit. "Will they believe me?" "They'll believe evidence," Denise answered. "And you need to be prepared for her to retaliate." Ethan swallowed hard. "She already has." Denise glanced at the restraining order paperwork. Her mouth tightened. "This allegation," she said quietly, tapping the ugliest line with her pen, "is a scorched earth tactic." I felt my hands curl into fists under the table. Denise looked at me. "Mr. Brocklowski, I need you to hear this clearly. The best revenge is not humiliation. It's custody, it's safety. If we chase her emotionally, she'll keep baiting you into mistakes. If we stay disciplined, she'll hang herself on her own behavior." I stared at the wall behind her, where a framed certificate hung like a reminder that the world still had rules. Then I said, "I can be disciplined." Denise nodded. "Good, because she's going to escalate." She was right. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said I needed to. "Mr. Brocklowski?" a woman asked. "Yes." "This is Karen Dorsey," she said. "I'm a nurse at Meadow Ridge Elementary." My heart stumbled. "Is Caleb okay?" There was a pause just long enough to scare me. "He's here," she said gently. "He fell during recess." I stood so fast my chair scraped the floor. "I'm not allowed near him. There's an order." "I'm aware," she said. "I'm calling because your name is listed as an emergency contact, and we cannot reach either parent." My skin went cold. "Neither parent?" "We've called Marissa," she said. "No answer. We've called Ethan. No answer." Ethan had been with me an hour earlier. His phone must have died, or Marissa had it, or something worse. "Is Caleb hurt?" I asked. "His arm is bruised," Karen said, "and he is very upset." My chest tightened. "Put him on the phone," I said, then realized what I'd asked. "We can't," Karen said quickly. "I'm sorry, because of the order, but I can tell you something, Mr. Brocklowski." I held my breath. "He keeps saying," she said softly, "that he doesn't want to go home today." The world narrowed. "Why?" I asked, voice rough. Karen hesitated. "He said his mother's friend gets angry. He said the friend yelled and grabbed him last night." "Blake." I felt it in my bones. "Karen," I said, "listen to me. Tell the school to hold him. Tell them to keep him inside. I'm calling my attorney and his father right now." I hung up and dialed Ethan. Straight to voicemail. I dialed again. Nothing. Then I dialed Harold. He answered immediately. "Go," I said. "Meadow Ridge. Now. Stay off property. Watch." "I'm already moving," Harold said and hung up. Then I called Denise. Denise didn't waste a second. "If the parents can't be reached and the child expresses fear, we push for an emergency pickup order," she said. "I'm filing right now. You stay home. Do not go near that school." It took everything in me not to get in my truck and drive like a madman. Instead, I walked to my sink and turned on cold water and pressed my hands under it until my fingers went numb. I could handle insults. I could handle lies. But the idea of my grandson being grabbed, scared, bruised while adults played games? That was a line. Denise called back less than 2 hours later. "We have an emergency hearing in the morning," she said. "Tonight we need safety." "What do we do tonight?" I asked. "Harold's going to observe," she said. "If Marissa picks him up and there's anything concerning, Harold calls law enforcement for a welfare check. If she doesn't pick him up, the school contacts authorities. Either way, it creates a record. A record. That was what Marissa couldn't charm her way out of, because records don't argue. They just exist. At 4:18 p.m., Harold called me. His voice was tight. "She's here," he said. "And he's not with her." My stomach dropped. "Who is?" "Blake," Harold said. "He's driving. She's in the passenger seat. They're arguing." I closed my eyes. "Is Caleb in the car?" "Not yet," Harold said. "They're parking. Blake's smoking. Marissa's on her phone." I could picture it perfectly. A woman who thought rules were for other people, and a man who treated anger like a language. "Harold," I said, "do not intervene." "I won't," he said. "But listen, she's walking in." Blake stayed by the car. A minute passed. Harold spoke again, lower. "Caleb came out holding his backpack. He's moving slowly. Nurse is walking him. Marissa's yanking his hand. He's trying to pull away." My vision blurred. "I can't," I started. Harold cut in. "Blake just got out. He's leaning toward Caleb." He pointed. Caleb flinched. "Call it in," I said. "I already did," Harold answered. "Welfare check. Officers 2 minutes out." I sat down hard on my kitchen chair and stared at the old knot in the wood grain like it could anchor me. Harold kept talking like he was narrating a storm. "Marissa saw the patrol car," he said. "She froze. Blake is walking back to the car fast, too fast. Marissa is pretending to smile." "What about Caleb?" I asked. "He's crying," Harold said. "He's wiping his face. He's looking around like he wants someone else." Then Harold's voice shifted, sharper. "Blake just shoved the backpack into the trunk," he said. "He's getting in. Marissa's trying to pull out." In my mind, I saw them driving away, leaving a school parking lot with a child who didn't want to go, and an officer who might not have enough to stop them. I felt sick. Harold inhaled. "Officers at their window," he said. "Marissa is talking. Blake's jaw is tight. He's gesturing. He looks like he wants to fight." A long pause. Then Harold said very quietly, "They opened the back door. Officers looking at Caleb's arm." I held my breath. "Caleb is saying something," Harold continued. "He's pointing at Blake." Then Harold exhaled like a man releasing pressure. "The officer is calling for backup," he said. "They told Marissa to step out." I pressed my hand to my mouth. Harold's voice stayed calm, but I could hear satisfaction underneath it. "This is the moment," he said. "She's losing control in public." That night, Denise called me with a voice like steel wrapped in silk. "Marissa is under investigation for child endangerment," she said, "and we have documentation that your trustee credentials were used fraudulently." My body went weak with relief and rage, both at once. "Do I get to see him?" I asked. "Not yet," Denise said. "Tomorrow, emergency hearing. If the judge grants temporary custody to Ethan, we can ask for supervised visitation for you and a no-contact order for Blake." I stared out my window at my dark yard. "You said she'd escalate," I said. "She did," Denise replied, "and now she's paying for it." The next morning in court, Marissa arrived in a conservative dress and a face carefully painted to look wounded. She brought her mother, a sharp-eyed woman with a tight mouth. Blake wasn't allowed inside because of the school incident, but his presence lingered in the way Marissa kept glancing toward the doors. Ethan looked like a ghost. He sat beside Denise and barely blinked. Marissa's attorney tried the same tactic she'd started with. He suggested I was unstable, that I'd interfered, that I was obsessed, that I was angry because Marissa set boundaries. Then Denise stood. Denise didn't raise her voice. She didn't call Marissa names. She just placed evidence on the table like bricks. The forged document, The bank logs, the examiner's statement, the security footage transcript, the school nurse's notes, the officer's welfare check report. Marissa's face didn't crack right away, but I saw her hands start to tremble when Denise pointed to the forged signature. I saw her swallow hard when Denise explained that money taken from a child's account wasn't a family argument. It was a crime. And then the judge asked Marissa a simple question. Why was a convicted felon driving your child to school pickup? Marissa's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She looked toward Ethan, and in that look I saw what she was used to doing. She was used to bending him. She was used to making him small. But Ethan didn't look away this time. He sat up straighter, like a man finally remembering he had bones. He didn't have a ride, Marissa said weakly. I needed help. The judge's eyes were flat. Help. With school pickup. Marissa's cheeks flushed. You don't understand what Nathaniel has been doing. He's been... The judge held up a hand. No, she said. Today is not about your father-in-law. Today is about a child. I felt my throat tighten, because for the first time in weeks, an authority figure was saying the only sentence that mattered, about a child. The ruling came fast. Temporary custody to Ethan. Marissa allowed supervised visitation only. A no-contact order between Caleb and Blake. And the restraining order against me? The judge ordered it revisited pending further investigation, noting that the allegation appeared connected to retaliation. Marissa's face went pale. She didn't cry. She didn't perform grief. She looked furious. Because fury is what leaks out when control is ripped away. Outside the courthouse, she finally snapped. This isn't over, she spat at me, loud enough for people to turn. You did this. You think you're some hero. You ruined my life. Ethan stepped between us. No, he said, voice shaking but firm. You ruined your life. Marissa stared at him like she'd never seen him before. Then she did the one thing people like her always do when the mask fails. She blamed the child. He made it worse, she snapped, jerking her chin toward the hallway where a caseworker waited with Caleb. He cried. He told them things. He made me look bad. Ethan's face twisted with horror, and I knew then, with absolute certainty, that my grandson had been living under a roof with a woman who could resent a child for telling the truth. The finale didn't come in one dramatic punch. It came in consequences. The fraud investigation moved forward because the forgery wasn't just a suspicion. It was documented. Marissa's accounts were subpoenaed. The betting payments weren't family expenses. They were traced. The transfers to names she claimed not to know were traced to Blake's associates. She tried to spin it. She tried to cry. She tried to say she was stressed and misunderstood. But paper does not care about tears. Blake tried something different. 2 nights after the hearing, my motion sensor light snapped on at 2:07 a.m. I was awake because I hadn't been sleeping well for weeks. My house creaked. The wind moved tree limbs. Every sound felt like a warning. I looked out my bedroom window and saw a figure near my shed. A man, tall, broad, moving with the certainty of someone who believed fear worked. I didn't go outside. I didn't grab a weapon and play hero. I did what I've done my whole life when faced with a problem bigger than muscle. I used preparation. After the restraining order served me, I'd upgraded my cameras. Not for revenge, for truth, for record. I watched the monitor by my bed. The figure moved toward my back door. My phone was already in my hand. I called the sheriff's office and spoke calmly. There's a man trying to enter my property, I said. I'm inside. Cameras are recording. The dispatcher asked me to describe him. I did. The figure tried the doorknob. Then he stepped back, angry, and kicked the lower panel hard enough to rattle the frame. Then he did something that made my blood ice over. He looked up into the camera and smiled. as if he knew I was watching. Then he raised his hand and made a slow, deliberate slicing gesture across his throat. A threat. Not subtle, not arguable, just pure intimidation. 2 patrol cars arrived within minutes. The figure tried to run, but my yard is fenced. He hit the back gate and realized too late that I'd locked it with a chain. The officers tackled him hard in the grass. When they turned him around, my porch light caught his face. Blake Rourke. His smile was gone. The next day, Marissa called Denise in tears, claiming she had no idea Blake would do that. Denise asked her one question. "Then why did you tell him where Nathaniel lives?" Marissa's silence was answer enough. Blake was charged for attempted unlawful entry and threats. The video made it easy. And that video did something else. It took Marissa's narrative and burned it down to ash. Because when you accuse an old man of being dangerous, and then your felon boyfriend breaks into his property and threatens him on camera, people start asking who the real danger is. Weeks later, Ethan and I sat on my back porch while Caleb played in the yard with an old tackle box, opening and closing it like it held treasure. The pond was still there, patient, waiting. Caleb hadn't asked to fish yet, not until he felt sure nobody would yank him away again. Ethan looked older than his years, but there was a steadiness in him now, a new spine. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I let it go too long." I looked at my son's hands, the same hands I once held when he learned to walk. "You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." Ethan nodded. "She keeps texting," he admitted. "She says you turned me against her." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. "She turned you against her," I said, "with her own choices." When Caleb finally walked up to me and said, "Grandpa, can we go to the pond again?" My throat tightened so hard I could barely answer. I just nodded. We went the next morning. No shouting, no car doors slamming. Just a boy and his grandfather and water that didn't judge. Caleb cast his line, watched the bobber, and leaned against my side like he was reclaiming a piece of himself. And I realized the revenge I'd wanted at the beginning, the humiliation, the exposure, the satisfaction of watching Marissa panic, wasn't what truly mattered. What mattered was this: a child breathing calmly again, a father finally choosing his son over his fear, a liar learning that accusations can become a trap if you push too hard. Still, I know some people will say I went too far when I froze that account, called for help, and fought back the way I did. So tell me the truth. Was I right to do what it took to protect my grandson, even if it meant destroying my daughter-in-law's life in the process?
My grandpa's worst really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.